Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the Kentuckian. I'm so glad that you decided to join us for another episode, especially as we start into our journey producing videos. Again, something I'm very excited about. This is only the second one that I have done where we're transitioning from doing just a podcast to a YouTube Rumble sort of video channel, and we'll still be on Spotify and that sort of thing. Of course, just the audio there. But I'm very excited as I'm starting to get into this. There's still a lot I'm figuring out. I hope that you'll be patient with me. Even now, there's certain things like if I'm over here, then it's probably going to sound a little different, but then you can't see my lovely face. So I haven't figured out exactly what I'm going to do with that. I may just do some angling. I'm still figuring that out. Even now, and this is another reminder, I am still looking at my notes here on my computer. I don't know that I'm going to keep doing that long term. I haven't figured out exactly how I want to format things yet because I haven't done this very much, obviously. So right now, I'm still looking at my computer. I'm still writing out a script as I used to with the podcast. I may end up changing that to try and help me be a little more natural and flow a little better with my videos, but we'll see. So again, I hope that you'll bear with me. If you have any thoughts or suggestions about things that would help me produce the Kentuckian better, make a better finished product for you, please let me know. That's a great thing to put into the comments. I'll be sure to check those out as much as possible if you'd like to put that there. And of course, it helps with my visibility as well when people are interacting with my videos. Today, for this episode, I want to remind you not to get discouraged. I know with the election not living up to many people's expectations, which I have a video on, by the way, from last week, if you'd like to check that out, and so many other disturbing things that are going on in this country, I know that there are many people out there, I've talked to many of them, that are somewhat discouraged. They're discouraged about the way the country's going. They're discouraged about what the future holds. It's understandable. I get it. I sometimes struggle with some of the same things. It seems like such a daunting task at times when I look at the country and the world around me. But that's what they want. That's what the left wants. That's what those that are trying to control you want. They want you to be discouraged. They want you to be down. And that's what I plan on dispelling today. The first thing that we need to be reminded of, we often have to hear things many times before they really stick, where there's something to be said for repetition. But what we really need to be reminded of, first thing for this episode, is that we are making real progress in this country. It sometimes doesn't seem like that. Certainly, they don't advertise it. And why would they? See, I want to go on a side tangent here for just a second. Why would the people that want you to be discouraged, that want to change the country fundamentally, that want to destroy this country, the controlled downfall, the controlled degradation of this country, similar to a term that John Doyle uses on his YouTube channel. If you'd like to check him out, I would recommend his content. The controlled decline of this country. Why would they want you to be optimistic? Why would they want you to know that there are good things going on in this country, that there's real progress being made to reverse the bad things that are happening here? Remember that the best way to beat someone isn't by overpowering them. The best way to beat someone is by making them give up, convincing them to stop of their own accord, to give up, to think they can't win, and to not try. That's actually something Sun Tzu in Sun Tzu's Art of War, he talked about, was the best fight is one that doesn't even have to be fought, the one that is never fought. If you can defeat your enemy without actually fighting them, that's the best. If you can convince someone that they have no chance of succeeding, you never have to try and stop them from succeeding. You never have to try and maybe they're trying to start a business. You never have to try and do anything to increase taxes or destroy their stock or scare off customers, because they're never going to open that business in the first place. They're going to give up. That's the best way to beat someone, and that's what they want to do to you. That's what you can't allow to happen. We also need to understand, and this is something that is a net positive, we need to understand that oftentimes in history, evil movements, evil beliefs, all those sorts of things, the evil agendas that have been pushed all throughout history, the evil ideologies, whatever case, whatever, those sorts of things, whatever example you might think of for yourself, generally, they fight back the hardest right before they collapse, right before everything falls apart. Think of a cornered rat. It may be just a stinking, putrid, weak little rat, but it will fight extremely hard with its last breath to try and save its life. And folks, there's a lot of rats out there. That's what we got to remember. It's like that cornered dog, right? That cornered rat. They're fighting hard, but it's their last hurrah in many ways. I believe that it is for most of this stuff. They are starting to be on their last legs, and that's part of the reason they are fighting so hard. That's part of the reason it seems like they're making so much progress, because they are failing. They are desperate. They are so brazen with this evil agenda that they are pushing on every corner at every time they get the chance, because they are getting desperate. Their power is slipping. People are questioning. People are having their eyes open, or are choosing to open their eyes, honestly. People are getting mad about what's going on. They're waking up and they're doing something about it, starting to do something about it anyway. COVID, that whole situation was a crazy power grab, for example. But while there was certainly damage done, it also pulled the curtain back even more and woke a lot of folks up. And those that it didn't wake up, it set the groundwork for them to wake up in the future. As I mentioned in my last video on the election, red states are getting redder. Conservative states are getting more conservative. Conservative people are getting more conservative. People are developing convictions, and they're strengthening the convictions that they had. People are starting to see the emptiness of this corporatized, materialistic, selfish, nationalized America that we have today, and they're starting to place value on things that really matter. And folks, when people do that, they will do something to guarantee that that's what they have. They will get up off their rear ends and they will do something to affect change in the world. When they have strong enough convictions, when they know what's right, when they see the emptiness of the kind of stuff that we're dealing with today, good things will come of it. Believe that. We need to understand as well that while the progress that we are making is still somewhat slow, admittedly. Again, I don't want to just make stuff up. I want to be frank. It is definitely slower than I would like, probably than you would like as well. But we also need to understand that when it comes to political change, when it comes to cultural change, when it comes to the change in people's hearts for this sort of situation, this situation in America is not the first time something like this has ever happened in history, certainly not. But we need to understand that when these sorts of changes start happening, the rate at which they happen, the rate at which change occurs, doesn't stay the same. And part of the reason we might discuss this is because we need to know more or less what we can realistically expect moving forward. We need to be honest with ourselves. We need to understand that a lot of damage has been done to this country. I want to be clear about that. There is a growing movement towards the right, and I'm not talking about the political right, towards what's right. There's a growing movement towards truth, but we also need to understand that there are things that are unsalvageable, and I don't particularly like to talk about that in one sense, but we need to understand that that's the way it is. There are things, there's concepts, beliefs, and even traditions that had to be totally killed in order to wake people up. That damage had to be done. Those things had to be eliminated, ruined, destroyed for people to see what was going on. And that will still happen some in the future as people continue to wake up. So we need to understand that as people start to stand for what's right, and they are starting to stand for what's right, the culture working itself out, these cultural issues being fixed and hammered out, and all these things being sorted, it's going to be messy. We need to understand that. I've used this illustration before, and I haven't used it, of course, on the videos. This is only the second video we have, but I have used it on the podcast. The current government and the current culture in America today is like a house that's infested with black mold. And then the black mold part is kind of the key to this illustration that I've used. And in case you don't know, black mold is a dangerous breed of mold that can develop in houses sometimes under the right conditions. What's significant about a black mold infestation is that once black mold has gotten into your house, into your walls, into your studs, wherever, it can't be removed. You can never actually remove it unless you cut the piece out. If it's extremely small, sometimes you can cut out a chunk and salvage it that way. But generally, by the time you find black mold, it is not just a small little tiny piece. And it cannot be removed. You cannot clean it off. You can't put chemicals on to kill it. It doesn't work. The only way that you're going to use that house, or really you're going to use the plot of ground that house is on for another house again, is to tear down the old one and build up a new house on the old foundation. Or in the case, sometimes you might just tear the foundation out too, although there's not really a reason to because of the mold. That's what has to be done. You have to destroy the house just to get rid of that corruption because of how deeply ingrained that dangerous mold is. And that's really the same situation we're in today. We still have the foundation, but the current structure is so heavily infested, it is in its current form unsalvageable. I believe that. And there's a lot of reasons why. Some I've talked before on the podcast about. Actually, that was, I don't know, thinking about that was a long time ago. I don't know exactly when it was, but I have talked about that sort of thing. Why talking about like precedents and crossing certain lines as a person, you open yourself up to things that with that current power structure, with that current culture, that current government will always be an option now because that line was crossed. But I don't want to get too much into that right now. Again, it's not all bad. I don't want to be too negative in these things that I'm saying. I want us to be realistic. I want us to understand the situation that we're in and understand what's realistic to expect in the future. But again, as I started this section on, the rate of this change that will in the long run be good, it will be messy to get figured out, but it is going to be good. And even though it's slow right now, that rate is changing. And that's what I want to kind of zone in on a little more here for a moment. As people start to understand and come to terms with these hard truths, even the ones that we've just been talking about, just the nature of this country, what's going to have to be done, that we're going to have to do what's right. We can no longer live in sin and just doing whatever we want. We have to stand on truth. All these different things, and that's just a few examples. As people start to understand it, accept it, and come to terms with it, that's actually going to be a good thing for many reasons. One in particular being is they accept the reality of their situation, of all of our situation, and as they start to do something about it as well, the progress that they personally make builds momentum. As humans, we have different thresholds, you might say, that govern our actions. They govern what extremes we're willing to go to, what we're willing to sacrifice or do, those sorts of things. Kind of those mental lines that we have that we won't cross this line for whatever reason. Sometimes it's good reason, sometimes it's bad. When someone finally accepts the reality of our situation, and what is entailed, what is going to be necessary to fix it, just how serious things have gotten, the real effect that these things have on regular, everyday people, all these different things. Once they understand that, they've crossed a threshold. It's now easier, once they accept that truth, it's now easier for them to consider the realistic future of this country. Because they've opened their mind to it. They've crossed that line. They've opened that can of worms, if you will, right? They've said, all right, well, that could happen, and I always said it couldn't. So now their attitudes change. They've crossed a threshold, and they can accept things that maybe before they wouldn't have even considered and scoffed at. Another example, when you've talked to one of your coworkers about politics or God, and you actually made a definitive stand for what you believe in. Let's bring it home, right? When you take that initiative, and you've always avoided politics because, man, I don't want to get into trouble, but you talk to somebody, you take a stand for what you believe. Again, maybe it's politics, maybe it's religion. Both of them are important. Religion a little more so, of course. But you've talked about something that generally you're not supposed to talk about, that could have consequences with it, and that a lot of people aren't sure about themselves. You've crossed another threshold. Now that you've done that one time, it's a lot easier for you to talk with anyone else about the truth. And to not be afraid to stand for what you believe in. See, you've crossed that line, you've crossed that threshold, and now it's easier. You're starting to build momentum. When you take small actions to prepare your family for what may come in the future, maybe that's economic, maybe that's political, whatever the case might be, things you might do to try and make sure your children are properly educated, or you're diminishing the damage that's done to them in school or wherever else. Maybe you're putting away some extra food, maybe you're those sorts of things, whatever it might be. Once you've taken a few of those small steps, you've crossed another threshold. Let's take it another step. Say that you've started to organize with a real close friend of yours. Like, man, if things really go south, me and him, we're going to meet up, we're going to take care of our families, that sort of stuff. That's just one example. That's not the only thing that you could do, not the only way you could organize. Maybe you're working on a political campaign, like, man, we can make a difference here. Let's get out and plaster some posters places. Let's get out and hit some doors, right? Now that you've crossed that threshold, now that you've done that, you've organized with somebody that you trust, well, now it's a lot easier in the future for you to stand with your friends and neighbors. It's a lot easier for you to organize on a larger scale and have someone to stand with you in the most difficult of times, and the most difficult of challenges that you might face, at the same time making you more likely to stand your ground. Now you've crossed that threshold, because a lot of times we don't work with other people that even agree with us. We're scared, we're lazy, we don't think it'll work, whatever the case might be. But once you cross that threshold, once you actually have done it one time, once you've convinced, yeah, I need to do this, even if it doesn't work, and you just do it because it's the right thing to do, not because even necessarily the effectiveness of it, now you've crossed a threshold and you can do so much more. You've built more of that momentum. You can do those things now easier than you could have before, because you crossed that line, because you did it for the first time, and you've opened up your mind to things that you didn't really consider before. And as all of this happens, your personal relative strength and activity that you're doing to try and make a difference out there, whatever you might be focusing on, religion, politics, or, local politics, federal politics, preparing for economic downturn, whatever the case might be, whatever you're doing, as you increase and do that more and more, each of them build off the last. Once you do, you talk about somebody, talk to someone about something, it gets easier to talk to your friend to organize, right? It builds. You keep crossing those thresholds and your momentum builds, and crossing some of those thresholds gets easier too because of that momentum, because of the other lines that you've crossed, because of the other things that you've done that were hard, that now have motivated you and given you the confidence to do something you didn't think you could, or didn't think was worth it. You're moving forward, you're getting more momentum, you're crossing those thresholds easier, you're doing more because you know you can, you know there's something to it, you know this is worth it, I can do this, I can make a difference. You're motivated, you're energized, and whenever you're interacting with other people in this situation, you're also helping them to build momentum too. It's a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. Now, bringing it back to the kind of the general state of the country and the things that we're going through, I believe that we're in the earlier stages of this process of building momentum. I don't think we're in the earliest stage, but I do think that we are still in an earlier stage. But we need to understand that it's not going to stay at this rate of progression. We're not going to be fixing things at this rate forever. It is going to get better faster as we go along, as we get motivated, as we cross those thresholds, as we do something. It's going to happen. And thinking about all these things, thinking about the good things that are going on, thinking about what we can realistically expect, that not only are we making progress, but that progress is going to come quicker, we also need to push forward from this point on. We need to understand that there is a great task ahead of us. If anything, I think the election should have shown us that. We still have a long way to go, but it is a perfectly achievable task. That's what we need to remember. That's what we need to believe. We can do it. Now is not the time to get discouraged. Now is the time to be energized. Now is the time to be motivated. Now is the time to get up off your rear end and do something. Make a podcast. Make a YouTube channel, right? And there's more I can be doing. But I'll just be frank with you. Doing the podcast, as I mentioned on the last podcast episode, I've done this for almost 2 years now. I've done over 80 episodes of the podcast. I've made other content. Of course, now I'm making videos. And doing this, at first it started off, it was pretty rough. I wasn't putting as much into it. I didn't have as much production value. There were things I just didn't know. But man, sticking with it for this long, staying consistent, that has motivated me to do so many more other things. It does. It gets me motivated. And there's more I can be doing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, well, I'm doing the Kentuckian, so that should be good. By no means am I saying that. But now that I've done something like this, I'm more motivated to do other things. It works that way. We should be motivated. We should be energized. There is good going on. There's progress being made, and we can fix this with God's help. I want to throw that out there. With the providence of God, with truth. It's not our own power. I just want to make that clear, because the last thing we need is to get arrogant. The last thing we need is to forget our place, to forget the reality of the situation and why we should be confident. Because if we get arrogant, if we get to thinking, well, this is all us, we're doing this because we're so great, then we've lost again. We need to be on watch for that. But we should be energized. We should be excited because now we have a path forward. and we can push forward. We can fight harder. We can dig our heels in. We can grit our teeth. The harder the battle gets, the harder we fight. We never give up. We need to remember that nobody said that doing what's right was standing for what's right. Nobody said any of that was ever going to be easy. And a lot of times it's not. But as we think about all the different things that we're dealing with, all the evil things that we're fighting, as we think about standing for what's right, we think about one side versus the other, and man, are we going to win or are we not going to win? How can you be motivated? How can you be excited? How can you be confident? What if they just win? What if we're just not powerful enough? Well, let me tell you, friends, and I want you to pay attention to this. With the flood of immorality, the tyrants, the transgender movement, the acceptance and encouragement of every vice and evil imaginable almost, connected to all the destruction of the economy, the crushing of all good and pure and helpful innovation in the world to make our lives better, the elimination of the ability for you to take care of your family, as powerful as all these things seem, as much progress as they have made, and they have done damage, they have made progress, make no mistake. Perhaps at times they even seem insurmountable. As I mentioned, there is one advantage that we have that they do not have and that they will never have. And this one advantage makes all the difference. Despite all the money, the influence, the audience reach, the social, cultural, and in some cases even religious approval, despite legal approval and protection, despite all the guns and brown shirts and tyrannical soldiers and anything else that's considered significant in this world or powerful in this world that evil may have at its disposal, we have the key to victory. We are right and they are wrong. That's the key. That's the thing that keeps us pushing forward. That's the reason we can know that we will achieve victory. We have truth and we have righteousness and they do not. We will win and they will not. Take heart, my friends. Be sober, be vigilant. We will win this if we stick to truth, if we stick to righteousness. You can take that to the bank. Well, I hope that was motivating for you. I hope that it was encouraging. That was certainly meant to be uplifting. I want to thank you for joining the Kentuckian for another exciting episode. I really mean this stuff. I believe it. I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it. I hope that you've gained something from this. I really do. And of course, now I'm going to do my shameless plug. But seriously, though, I do really hope that this has been encouraging for you. You can, of course, support the Kentuckian if you think that what we're doing is good, if you think that this message is on point, if it's uplifting, if it's encouraging to you, if you know it's right, if you want to spread it. There's a lot that you can do. There's a lot that you can do to support the Kentuckian. You can share the channel with other people. Of course, we're still small yet. The whole reason, if you're new to joining us, the whole reason that the main reason that we moved from the podcast on various podcast platforms to doing a video and then putting that audio on podcast is because I believe that's where a lot more audience growth can be had. So we're still small yet at the time this video is published, but we do have a lot of potential, and you all sharing it does make a big difference. Of course, there's the things like subscribing, liking the video. Those make a big difference. They help with visibility. They also help make sure that you are able to get updates when there's new content coming out. So if you're interested in any of those things, please feel free to do them. Again, I hope that you bear with me as I am getting used to the video production. I've done a little bit of video production in the past, but I've still got a lot to figure out. So I do hope that you'll be patient. I'm sure that there's plenty of flaws you can pick out going forward, but hopefully that they will, I trust that they will get better as we go along. Again, even me, just kind of the flow of me speaking and everything, I have to kind of work on that and try and get that flow down better, because it is different speaking to a camera than just speaking into a microphone. But I do hope that this has been encouraging for you. Support us in any way that you can. There's merchandise. We have the merchandise store, some things that you all can get some cool merch and also help the Kentuckian out and maybe do a little spreading the word for us too. And I hope that you'll consider any of those options. Of course, we have the Patreon, and you can follow us on social media as well. But above all, Again, I hope that you've been encouraged, and I want you all to remember, friends, that as long as you and I are doing what's right, we make a real difference in this whole world. This has been Ryan Dalton of the Kentuckian, signing off.